Have you ever wondered how professional artists bring games to life? If you have, take a seat right here. And here's something I'll tell you for free while you do. Greatness is never just about graphics. It's about so much more than that. And today I'm going to be reacting to all Ghillied Up, the best single-player FPS mission of all time, in my opinion. And I'm going to be breaking it down from an environment artist perspective. Let's get into it. And I'm going to pause right away. Because here's the thing. If art and design do their jobs, everything about the mission is set up in pretty much the first few frames. And that's exactly what's going on here. You know, this is probably the most memorable opening frame of any Call of Duty mission there's ever been. And that's for a lot more reasons other than, you know, the bush just stands up and comes to life, which is iconic anyway. By the way, am I the only person who asked for a ghillie suit for Christmas after playing this when I was about 12? Anyway, back to the topic. Instantly, we've got an amazingly composed frame here. You know, this is probably in games. You know, it's a free camera, right? We're not working to shot like you would in films, but the opening frame of something is pretty much the only place you have complete control as an artist, like compositionally. So you got to make the most of it, right? And the best visuals here, there's no exposition. Well, there is, but if we ignore that, the best visuals are about showing and not telling. So here, for example, in the distance, we've got that Chernobyl nuclear power plant. And instantly that tells us exactly where we are. You know, you're pointing literally right at it as you spawn in. And it's not just the fact you're pointing at it. It's the fact that the artists have deliberately framed this. They're using various composition techniques, right? So immediately we got those power lines. That's a nice sort of leading line that's drawing you in towards that power station in the distance. We've also got sort of a contrast between organic and man-made here. Obviously the power station is not made of trees, it's made of concrete and stuff. But that sort of silhouette really contrasts well against sort of all the foliage that's going on here. On top of that, you know, it's backlit pretty much by the sun directly. It stands out really well. This sort of 30% of the frame is negative space, which is, again, just, it all helps to sort of draw your eye and make this a really well composed first shot. So why go to all this effort of framing this so well at the very beginning? Well, it's two reasons. Firstly, the one I just mentioned, where, you know, it's the only place you have full control over the framing and composition in games, given their nature. But it's also psychological from a design perspective. Essentially, you're showing a reward to the player. You know, they don't know it just yet, but you're beginning to open a loop, right? So you show the player where they're going, and then later on, at the very end, you show it again at much closer distance, and that's kind of like a little feedback loop that gets closed, and it kind of brings satisfaction to the player when they do complete the mission. But also, it's from an environment art perspective, you know, these game levels, they're not as big as they seem, right? You know, in reality, that power station's very far away, right? But in game terms, you know, we're going to be there in 15 minutes, and we're not just like sprinting towards it, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes on here that slows you down. So it's kind of creating sort of an illusion of distance, which also kind of just makes the world feel a lot more immersive. Okay, we can unpause now. I'm going to roll forward at least a little bit more.
Too much radiation. We'll have to go around. Follow me and keep low.
So I know I played it again for about 5 seconds, but there's so much to talk about in this first minute. So that little line there, too much radiation, we'll have to go around. Sorry, Scotland. That does a lot. It's kind of a bit of narrative, it's a bit of design, it's a bit of environment art, and it's all kind of wrapped up into one. Because basically in games there are two types of boundaries, right? You've got hard and soft. I know, and I still find that funny too, but I do have the humour of a 13-year-old. Anyway, soft barriers are boundaries that the player can go through, but they kind of get forced out, right? So you think edge of the map in Battlefield, stuff like that. It's basically saying, you know, you can't go here. And it's normally like some sort of voice line, damage over time, or whatever, something like that. You know, they don't stop you outright, but they suggest they allow you to suggest the world continues, right, beyond the playable area. And it's a nice trick that makes levels feel more natural and bigger than they actually are. And it's something we can do in modern games, right, because we have more budget, we can spend more resource on stuff that's outside the play space, which is where, hard barriers come in. In, older games, they kind of feel a lot more arena-like in terms of the levels, like very like hard walls. And that's what hard barriers are, right? They're sort of things you can't go past. So your fences, buildings, walls, tree lines, all that stuff. Um, but the disadvantage of those is while they stop the player going out of bounds, they do kind of break immersion sometimes if they're not done correctly. Um, so ideally, you want kind of a combination of both, right? And that's what this dialogue at the beginning is doing. When he says there's too much radiation, it's kind of justifying the existence of these soft barriers, right? So that kind of is backed up by these radiation signs in the environment. That's kind of a bit of environmental storytelling. It all kind of threads together and makes kind of this, it creates immersion, right? So yeah, it's really well done in this mission.
Careful. There's pockets of radiation all over this area. If you absorb too much, you're a dead man.
Again, justifying those soft barriers, right? Just in case you missed it the first time. And yeah, this kind of little building here. So when you're guiding players through a level, you kind of want to leave like nice little breadcrumbs, right? That's what it's called, is breadcrumbing. So you kind of leave a bit of space, then you put an interesting landmark the player wants to go to. Normally quite contrasting, and that just kind of naturally guides the player through the level. I mean, obviously you're following this Scottish guy, Captain Macmillan, throughout this level. But it's a good rule of thumb when you're making sort of more linear levels that have an illusion of being open world.
He's down. Good night. Move.
A little bit more breadcrumbing here.
Hold up. There's more cover if we go around.
Really nice details here, kind of showing the construction there with the bolts. Stuff like that really helps, ground stuff into the world. If you're just kind of placing planks on buildings, just letting them float there, it's never as immersive as if you actually go to the effort to kind of show how it's constructed, right? So this world is kind of pretty grey and desaturated, and that's kind of deliberate, right? It's very Soviet bloc kind of look, it's kind of the classic sort of Mexico where you'll see everything's kind of tinted orange and stuff like that. It's kind of that version, I guess, but for the Soviet look, right? But the thing is, this is something that happens a lot in games. Is people, and scenes end up becoming quite muddy and boring and brown and grey. It's quite a common thing. So what you have to do really to make that look work is you have to inject little pops of color, right? So you can see here, this building and this car, this blue car, it's just like a little sort of 10-20% pop of color that really just kind of brings the scene to life. And if you remove that, the scene would be a lot more boring and flat, and it would arguably be harder to navigate, right? Because you don't have sort of that contrast that your eye locks onto, and it's like, okay, I've got to go this way, right? And then that building stands out as well because it has that different color. It's showing you, okay, this is the next breadcrumb you've got to follow.
Forward area clear.
Yep, there's those radiation signs again. Perfect example of like a soft barrier. Go into the church now. And this is another key part of a good level and this kind of comes under the sort of pacing side of things, which this level gets a lot of praise for, rightfully. So basically what you want to do is kind of divide your spaces up. So not only for gameplay, it kind of lends plausibility to, okay, I've gone through this divide and now whatever happens in the next space, it's kind of plausible that it's not going to alert people that were sort of in the background there. It's just also a sort of a nice way to sort of close a chapter, right? If you see these dividers and levels there, it's almost like chapters in a book. You know, you go through the first chapter, that's kind of done. Then you go, you know, into a divider through it. You know, everything's out your back of your mind. It's kind of cleansed your palette visually, and you're on to the next bit, right? And this is a really nice sort of little mini vignette here with the graveyard. You know, this could be just a boring space, but you know, it's grounded with the church as well. Really good stuff.
Enemy helicopter, get down.
Nice. Again, it's just like little bits of pacing, like, you know, just that little helicopter flying by. That could be quite a boring moment, but then you sprinkle in just a little, really, really simple, just keyframe a helicopter going along, and you've got like a nice little bit of break in the pacing there. You know, it keeps the tension up, reminds the player sort of they're behind enemy lines, all that good stuff. Here we go. I remember completely shitting myself the first time I played this. So well done. Are you just kind of in this clearing?
There's too many of them. Let them go. Keep a low profile and hold.
So how many of you actually tried to start a fight with these guys? Because I know the first time I definitely tried to start a fight with these guys and got mowed down instantly.
Do it slow and steady. No quick movements.
I think I also tried to crawl under one of the APCs as well, which, again, that didn't go well either. Good times, 2007, man. Good times. So, I mean, this is also like a very deliberate thing that they're doing here. You know, why are we in a ghillie suit if you know, we're in a densely covered forest with lots of cover and sort of buildings that maybe you could kind of dip in and out of, something along that line. By putting the player in sort of this clearing, you know, you're sort of leaning into the power of the ghillie suit. And at the very beginning, when that bush kind of comes to life, again, it's sort of just like a visual thing that makes all of this plausible. You know, I don't think anyone saw that sort of Captain Macmillan in the bush, so in the grass, just lying there before he stood up. It's kind of like, oh, Jesus, he was basically invisible. It was literally Harry Potter in the invisibility cloak, right? But if we're in the forest, it kind of doesn't matter. You just kind of dip in between trees, and this sort of scene wouldn't even be possible, right? Because the vehicles wouldn't be able to get through. You could just sneak around people. But yeah, visually, we're in a clearing, and that's like a conscious choice, just so you know, the ghillie suit becomes sort of this all-powerful thing that you have to rely on. And that's exactly what's going on here. This is kind of like the ultimate show of power of the sort of ghillie suit. It makes you feel pretty much like a god, essentially. If you're 12, you literally feel like a god during this scene when you get through it.
Nice and slow.
And he's probably gonna, yeah, he's gonna turn around and hopefully teabag. Oh, amateur, didn't even teabag. But have you even done that? And you know, you got to teabag it, so surely. But anyway, here's the thing. This is a classic case of environment art and design really marrying together perfectly. But that's not actually like the easiest thing to do in the professional world, because level designers and environment artists, they come at things from a very different angle. You know, level designers will always be the first to sacrifice gameplay. Sacrifice art, sorry. They will never sacrifice gameplay. And environment artists will be the ones who want to sacrifice the gameplay to make better art and better visuals. So working them together is basically like a divorced couple raising a child, with the child being the level that you have to work on. And while we have different approaches, we all want the same thing at the end of the day, and that is for our child to become a lawyer or an astronaut or something like that. Definitely not like a glue sniffer. Yeah, you don't want to raise your level to be a glue sniffer. You know, and this level is basically Harvey Specter as a lawyer. You know, they've worked together so well here.
Looks like they've already eliminated them.
You know, I still know people. When I was at Infinity Ward, I worked with people who had worked on this Call of Duty, and you know, one of the level designers, great guy. Really cool people who worked on this.
Taking him out without alerting the rest isn't going to be easy, but then again, neither is sneaking past them. Your call.
So that truck in the background is definitely deliberately placed, and that red container. And that's because you kind of want to frame key things where you have an opportunity to. And, you know, if it's sort of against the bushes, it's a lot harder. It's a noisier background to read a human against. So when you put like a solid thing behind a human, you really make them pop and stand out. I mean, obviously we're gonna have to shoot these guys, so it just makes it like a nicer, more professional, clean experience when you can just look and see and then immediately pick the silhouette out.
I'm in position. Take the shot when you're ready.
So a lot of games will add sort of rim lighting that's actually tied to the characters. You can actually see it a little bit here. It's kind of like they're rim lit. And that's a deliberate thing, you know, it's a light it's essentially parented to. Or it can be like a Fresnel shader or something fancy like that. But its purpose is just a little, you know, it's to help things stand out a little bit more.
Stay in the shadows.
Really common in sort of FPS games in particular, where visibility is crucial, and games, you know, because it's a 2D medium and it can get kind of, you know, muddy and sort of flat sometimes. It's just something that helps. You know, there's a reality where you have full depth perception. You know, this is just an illusion of 3D. It's essentially just kind of 2D, 3D that's been projected into 2D form here. So stuff like that just really helps. Here we go. One of the most iconic moments.
Stay low. He's mine.
Oi, Susie, huh?
That's how it's done. Let's
So yeah, obviously one of the most iconic moments in the entire level. I don't think he's even going to teabag him, right? That's another move. But I mean, this guy's had an absolute mare. You know, he's going to have to tell his mates the next day that he got attacked by a bush with a Scottish accent, and that's why you know they managed to get through and snipe the guy. You know, bit of a howler from this guy. But, you know, this is done on purpose, right? We've just had the most tense part of the mission, you know, crawling through the clearing. And, you know, I said earlier, this level gets so much praise for its pacing. And it gets it rightfully so, right? Because pacing and flow is critical to a good level, both from the sort of narrative and design point and the environment art. You know, everyone plays a role in that. So in the kind of open spaces before, that's where it's the most tense, right? That's where you're not in control, and that's, you know, how you make tense scenarios. You take control away from the player, and then in these closed spaces where there's lots of cover and concealment, you know, it's less tense because you are in control. You've got the ghillie suit and the sort of the gun. You know, it's all good, right? But good pacing is sort of where it's like a roller coaster. You know, you want to give the player a really tense moment and then give them a chance to sort of, you know, recover and release that tension. But it's also just about doing this like at exactly the right time. It's kind of like good comedy in a sense. You know, the content and the jokes can be amazing, but if the comedian's timing isn't bang on, then stuff kind of falls down. It's the difference between like a great comedian and just a good comedian who's got good jokes, you know. So they're absolutely nailing it here because this is like quite a funny moment, just after you've had the most tense moment, and it's done like it's timed perfectly. So you know that's what the best level designers and environment artists do is they create these moments, you know, with the perfect timing, and that's easier said than done, right?
go.
You know, he just picks up the overpowered P90. I bet he's going to mow these guys down as well with it.
Clear. Go.
Yeah, he's going to do that. Just as they're on their cigarette break. Mow him down with the most OP gun in the game.
This way. Let's go.
Really nice lighting, by the way, here. You know, it's kind of the placement of the containers really leans into that directional, natural light. So you see the entrances and exits are all framed really nicely. So it's really clear where you have to go. Again, little divider here. Just closes that chapter. We're on to the next part.
Get ready to move on my signal. Stay right behind me. Hold.
So again, we're going to go into sort of a moment here where control's taken away from the player. And if anything, the ghillie suit's not very effective at this point because you're going to have to sort of crawl under cars and stuff where you're not very well camouflaged against the car if you dress as a hedge. You know, so if these cars move, man, bit cooked.
Let's go.
But again, it's just an iconic moment, right? What I'd like to see on these cars is these trucks. More kind of dirt and stuff underneath and on the tyres. It feels a bit like they're just kind of fallen out of the sky and just been placed here, but that's a minor thing, you know. Kind of in environment art, you always want to kind of match the sort of level of grunge and stuff. You don't want to have like big disconnects like you have here with this super clean tyre on a really muddy road that's clearly been driven, right? Just something to think about when you're doing your environments. Oh, literally nearly crawled inside his arse there. Hope he doesn't, you know, let up a fat fart here. That's gonna compromise the mission very quickly.
Don't do anything stupid.
I suppose you could say that about this entire mission, really. Yeah.
Stand by.
And it's just about, you know, really building up the tension. Just like at the right exact moment, let's go. You always got to look back.
Ready. Go.
But again, I think that kind of says a lot about the sort of mental state it puts the player in. It's like, did they spot me? I've kind of got to turn back now.
Hold fast. No one saw us. Let's keep moving. This way.
Yeah, that kind of red container there on the corner. It's just a nice bit of colour that you can pick out. It's like, okay, I've got to go that way.
Don't move. Sniper. Fire escape. 4th floor. Dead ahead. Take him out, or he'll give away our position. Beautiful.
There's kind of a lot of tropes in this mission, but you don't really care because it's all just so well done. Like, you know, the classic snipe the guy and he falls down. You know, that's a pre-canned thing, so... But it works so well in this mission. We're into our first interior. Really nice set dressing in here, you know, really got that abandoned, damp. You know, you can see all the kind of set dressing is built up around the window. Which, you know, kind of where you'd expect the sort of glass, broken glass and all the, you know, stuff that flies in by the wind or whatever. That's where you'd expect it to be and build up. It's really kind of taking those bigger parts of the environment, then contextualizing them with smaller stuff. I do want to pause here actually because we're going to get to talk about foliage quickly. So there's a lot of foliage in this mission, but this stuff here where you're kind of mixing it in with the architecture and the man-made stuff, this is kind of where foliage really comes into its own, and it's a super powerful and underrated thing as an environment artist because, you know, man-made stuff tends to follow certain rules and expectations. You know, you kind of want columns that go all the way down, and you know, you kind of expect you know what a building should look like, but foliage can kind of do what it wants, right? And here it's like it's used as a framing device essentially. Obviously you've kind of got the grass either side of this path, but that's kind of framing the path, showing you where you need to go. It's kind of noise versus lack of noise. You know, that creates a contrast that you're able to follow. But then with these sort of creeping foliage, there's vines and stuff that's kind of going up around this archway. That's placed deliberately, right? It's used to kind of frame the entrance and draw your attention to it. And games like The Last of Us do this a lot where, you know, it's not just foliage for the sake of foliage. It's to look nice, but also to sort of enhance the sort of gameplay and navigation of a level for the player.
Stop.
So that's why you see foliage placed in corners and up against walls often. You know, it's deliberate by the environment artist to do that. And again, here on this entrance, but also it just kind of looks nice, right? Framing stuff looks nice. You're never just making, you're never just placing foliage just for the sake of it. You try to curate it. That's the advantage you have as an environment artist, is you can take the real world, but then you can also curate it to make it look even better. There you go. Pooch, don't look too friendly. Don't shoot it, man. Did that once, it was a bad time. Yeah, it's really nice set dressing here. You know, all these tables and stuff. It's all placed deliberately right to create that negative space that shows where the path is without, you know, having to make an obvious path. So let me just go back. Yeah, so you can see these are all placed up against the wall. Yeah, it's contextualized as well really nicely, but it just kind of sets up a nice path that you can follow. And contrast of detail, like with that grass and the path, that's a great way to sort of make obvious paths without, you know, kind of just placing like a sort of red tile that runs through the level or whatever. Again, lighting here, deliberate skylight. This is a classic one in games where you place the light, you place openings for light so you can frame the sort of way the player needs to go, right? You know, the light above the door sort of trope. Again, really nice contextualization set dressing here with the shelves, placing all the stuff that's fallen off them underneath. And then the skylight. You know, they work with natural light here, obviously, so there's no artificial light, so you have to be really clever. From, you know, this is environment artists work with lighting and design to sort of make the level really smooth to navigate, and you don't want to get lost by having sort of dark areas that you know, you sort of don't know where do I go next, sort of thing. Helicopter again, kicking up all the stuff. So this is something you want to do in games, is you pretty much always want to have the frame in motion. As soon as the frame becomes perfectly still, it begins to look like just a photograph, and it can really kind of kill the immersion. So just having those little particles and a justification for them to be flung up, really good sort of choice there to keep the level sort of lifelike. You know, at the end of the day, it's faux 3D, right? It's not actually 3D. This is a 2D screen. So you want to always try and create depth and movement just to keep the illusion alive. You know, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And there we go. That's the power plant again. We've kind of, you know, seeing it a lot closer now, and we've essentially closed that loop, right? We've come all this way, and we're also framing up the next objective and where we're going to go next. So, you know, we start the loop again. And there we go. That was all Ghillied Up, and we'll save one shot, one kill for another time. But yeah, thank you for watching this. I hope you all found it helpful. I believe that art isn't just about the best assets and graphics and stuff. It's about how you deploy those things, and this is a great example of that. You know, anyone could make this level with the assets you have today in terms of the visuals. You know, all the mega scans and photo scans we have, but not everyone can deploy them in a way that's so professional like this. I just love this level. But anyway, I'm gonna let me know what you want me to react to next. I've got a lot of plans for this channel, and yeah, I hate cameras, believe it or not. So this is gonna be really difficult for me. But yeah, I've got a few ideas. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Peace out.